Brothers and sisters, you are welcome to the Messiah channel. We are an end time channel. For those of you who have been watching this channel, you have seen that I have focused attention on awakening the Hebrews, those who are scattered over the world. And I'm doing that not because I'm racist or you are a racist, but it is a divine responsibility to awaken the Negro, to awaken the Hebrews. And I have a question. The question I'm asking is this: why is people too harsh on the Negro? Is it because of the race? Is it the color of the skin? Or is it because the Negro was enslaved, has been under slavery for a long time? Arab slavery and transatlantic slavery? Or is it because the Negro is a Hebrew, a secret that people have hidden for a long time? And you probably will say that all the three answers apply. The world is harsh on the Negro because of his race, because of the history of his enslavement and captivity, and also because the Negro is actually the Hebrew, the chosen of God. In going through this conversation, this question, I will take you to the land of Canaan, the promised land. And if you look at the Bible very well, you know that Noah had sons, and one of them actually the descendant of Noah, Canaan, was settled in the land of Canaan. And as you are aware, Canaan was black descendant of Ham, from the Noah family. Canaan settled in a place that was later settled by Israel. And historical records show that Canaan or Canaanites were black people. Historical records also show that there were black people living in the Ur of Chaldees, the place that was settled by Abraham. I learned my history lessons, and I was told that civilization began in Mesopotamia, along the rivers, along the banks of Tigris and Euphrates. But I didn't know that that place was settled by black people who contributed to that civilization. Some people have alternative view that civilization occurred along the banks of River Nile. In Egypt, if you hold to that theory, I'll also tell you that the banks of River Nile was inhabited by Negroes, black people, and records have shown that the civilization that occurred in ancient Egypt, that civilization was constructed by Negroes. And historians are aware of that. 10 philosophers, 10 historians, including Herodotus, acknowledge that the people in ancient Egypt were black people and were responsible for the civilization that emerged in ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians were very civilized. They pioneered a lot of developments in arts, in medicine, even in military warfare. And the Bible is very clear, very specific that Prophet Moses was schooled in the arts and science of the ancient Egyptians. And so if you read a book by Greensberg, the title is Gary Greensberg. The title is The Moses Mystery, the Egyptian origins of the Jewish people. The Moses Mystery, the Egyptian origins of the Jewish people. You notice that even the Jews are acknowledging the fact that there was an Egyptian origin, black origin of the Jewish people. Still in Egypt, the ancient historians, including Herodotus himself, said that the ancient Egyptians were black. If you believe in the Bible, you know that the Exodus happened in Egypt and the children of Jacob settled in Egypt. There was intermarriages. If you read the Bible, you know that Joseph married from Egypt. If you read the Bible, you also notice other such marriages that occurred in Egypt. And if you like history, I recommend you read the works of Sheikh Anta Diop. As you are aware, there was a conscious effort by Europeans to suppress information about the identity, the black identity of the ancient Egyptians. Similarly, there has been centuries of suppression of information about the Hebrew identity of the Negro. Sheikh Anta Diop, a Senegalese professor, proved that the ancient Egyptians were black. And not only that, the civilizations that emerged in Egypt, ancient Egypt, were nurtured by Negroes. The world didn't believe him. So in 1974, UNESCO organized a symposium in Cairo to give an opportunity for Sheikh Anta Diop to prove to the world that ancient Egyptians were black and that they were responsible for the civilization that occurred in Egypt, and the pharaohs were also Negroes. In 1974 in Cairo, there was a massacre. 18 scholars from Europe and Asia, they try as much as possible to disprove Sheikh Anta Diop. But Sheikh Anta Diop from Senegal and another professor from Congo, two of them, two Negroes, were able to dismantle the lies and the fraud perpetrated by European scholars who call themselves Egyptologists, trying to hide the facts of history in Egypt. And so you still have to remember our question. Why is so much hatred against the Negro? Is it because of his race? Is it because he was enslaved? Or is it because he's a Hebrew and the chosen of God? If you are a chosen of God, it means the prophecies about the chosen people of God must apply to you, and you must be able to prove that it applies to you. There are curses and promises about the chosen people of God, the Hebrews. The Bible is very clear about it. And I'll take you to Deuteronomy chapter 28, where the Lord talks about curses that will come to the Hebrews for disobeying God, and the promises, the blessings that will come to them if they repent. Ladies and gentlemen, the world has a beef, has an issue with the Negro. It is not only based on his race or the fact that he was enslaved, but it's because he is the Hebrew spoken of in the book. And throughout my research, I think the person who has done the most extensive research with regard to Deuteronomy chapter 28, the curses, that person is Ronald Dalton, an American who wrote a book, Hebrews to Negroes. Hebrews to Negroes. 4 volumes, volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, volume 4. And the book is very comprehensive. If you claim that you are a Hebrew and you are a chosen of God, then you must prove that the curses that the Lord told Moses it will happen to Hebrews, you must be able to prove that those curses came to you in your history. The curses include the prophecy that the Hebrews will be scattered over the world. There will be a reproach to the world, and they will be a byword to the world. They will plant vineyards, but somebody will take it. The curse in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68, that they will be taken into ships again into Egypt, and they will be sold into slavery. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 68 is very powerful. The last verse of Deuteronomy 28 is verse 68. That says that the chosen people of God, the Hebrews, will be taken into captivity into Egypt in ships again, and they will be sold as slaves. And so if anybody hates the Negro, it is not because he was enslaved. It is not because he was put into ships again. It's because he, as a Hebrew, he, as the subject of God's divine prophecy, was enslaved and shipped into Egypt, the second Egypt, again. And so the transatlantic slave trade that took place in Africa was a divine fulfillment of the prophecies about the Negroes that was given by God himself to Moses. It was a fulfillment of prophecy that was given by God himself to Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 to 14. If anybody asks you, how do you prove that the Negro is a Hebrew, you have to know these facts. And you have to know that there was a time that the Hebrews fled Jerusalem after the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And if you know your facts, nobody can deceive you. And you will know your fact when you read the book written by Rudolf Wenzel, From Babylon to Timbuktu. It's a book that details the history of the Negro, the Hebrews, who fled Jerusalem after it was destroyed and moved to different places, including West Africa, and settled in the kingdom of Judah that can be found in the old slave Negro maps about West Africa, particularly 1747 maps about West Africa. I'm saying that the Negro, the Hebrew, the Negro, the Hebrew, who was enslaved, actually is standing on the promises of God. And there's no way that you can be deceived when you know the facts. And so today, I'm going to talk about some of the facts And I'm taking you to Ghana. And I'm choosing Ghana because Ghana was the center for dispersing the Negroes into captivity all over the world. The Portuguese arrived in Ghana in 1471 and they built the Elmina dungeon in 1482. That became the center for dispersing the Hebrews over the world. Are there Hebrews in Ghana? Yes. I will mention some. The Ga Adanges in the coastal area in Ghana. The Ewes and the Kans, particularly the Ashantis. By the way, in proving that the Ashantis are Hebrews, I rely on similarities of culture between the Ashantis and the ancient Hebrews. If you read Leviticus very well, you will know that there are certain practices of the Ashantis that are similar to the practices of the ancient Hebrews as recorded in the Bible, in the Torah, and in Leviticus. I will mention just a few: circumcision. I will mention a few feats observed by the Ashantis resemble the feats that were observed in ancient Israel, including the Feast of Atonement. You can also watch similarities between how the Ashantis observe funerals. When somebody dies, there is a funeral in 40 days and 1 year anniversary. And this practice is still going on in Israel. And the garment of the Hebrew high priests during the time of Moses, during the time of Aaron, if you do research on the garment, you see similarity between that garment and the garment worn by the high priest of the Ashantis. The 12 breastplates on the garment of the high priest of the Ashantis is similar to the 12 breastplates on the garment of the high priest, as recorded in the Torah. The Negroes are people who live by tribes. And if you look at the Bible, the people of Israel, the Hebrews, they lived by tribes. And not only that, they are names of cities in Africa that are names that you see in Israel. And so if you go to Nigeria, the Igbos have a town. The name of the town is called Obu-Gad. Obu-Gad. You remember Gad, G-A-D, was one of the children of Jacob. The Igbos are Hebrews. And if you want to do research you will know that the Hebrews, and even Henry Kissinger, the U.S. Secretary of State, wrote a letter to President Nixon describing the Igbos of Nigeria as the wandering Jews of West Africa. Still on the Asantes, records, books written by professors have documented the similarities of culture between the Ashantis and the people of Jamaica, and conclude that the Negroes who were enslaved and taken to Jamaica, most of them were from the Asante tribes. And historical records show that the Asantes are Hebrews, migrated from ancient Egypt, from Mesopotamia, migrated to West Africa after the fall of Jerusalem. And there are so many books written regarding that fact. I was reading the story of Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was an African American who led slave rebellion in the United States, very famous. And some people believe that Harriet Tubman was an Ashanti. Her descendants were from the Ashanti tribe in Ghana. Why did they say that? They said that because she had the characteristics of the Ashantis, who are very aggressive. And if you look at the history of West Africa, Ghana, you will notice that the Ashantis rebelled against European imperialism and colonization in Ghana. And as a punishment, the king of Ashanti, Hajiman Prempeh I, he was captured by the British, and he was exiled into Sierra Leone. He was later taken into Seychelles Island that was controlled by the British. He was there for a long time, for over 24 years, before he was allowed to come back to Ghana, because he resisted British colonial rule and subjugation. And the queen, the princess, the queen of an Ashanti kingdom, the queen of Ejisu, her name is Ya Asantewa. Ya Asantewa fought against the British. And here is a story of a woman fighting against well-armed British army because the men had fled. And this woman was heroic. She was captured by the British, and he was put into the Elimina slave dungeon. And later, she was deported from Asante, and he was taken to Seychelles Island, and she never returned to her people. And so the story of the Negro is the story of the Hebrews in the Bible who were enslaved in fulfillment of the prophecy in Deuteronomy chapter 28. And the prophet Isaiah has said that in the last days, which is coming very soon, the root of Jesse, the Messiah, will gather them from where they were scattered to, in Cush, in Elam, in Patros, in Egypt, and from the islands of the sea. And so the world knows that the Hebrew is a Negro, the Negro is a Hebrew, and that's why he's hated. And the prophet Zephaniah, in Zephaniah 3 verse 10 says that beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, God's people, worshippers of God, will bring worship to the Messiah in his kingdom that is coming. And similarly, the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah 18 verse 7 is saying that the people of Ethiopia, Egypt, the Negro, will bring gifts to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And so to answer the question, why is the world hating the Negro? Is it because of his race? Probably yes. Is it because he was enslaved? Probably yes. But the truth is that the Negro is a Hebrew, and Satan and his agents are aware of that, and they will fight it. It's a spiritual battle. And unless you are awakened and you know the facts, you will not understand the spiritual battle. And so this is a message of awakening of the Hebrew, the Negroes and the Negresses, wherever you are scattered to. Thank you for this message.